Thank you for watching this video. My name is Lester Leavitt. I am a graduate assistant at Florida Atlantic University in the School of Public Administration. The title of this video and presentation is Collective Discourse Structuration. It's about eliminating the narrative boundaries for the inner city's poor in specifically. Before I get into the presentation, I should tell you why I actually felt it important to do this presentation and this essay. I did it because of people like this young man here. Alex Mason is a policy analyst for the Family Policy Network. He is a honors student, graduated with honors. He's got his bachelor's degree and he has 2 master's degrees. So he's a very intelligent young man for all intents and purposes. But what he says is indicative of a very, very deep and penetrating problem in America and around the world, actually. What he says is that young Christians have no stomach for controversy because they've bought into the lie that truth can be different for everyone. What does that mean when he says that there is only one truth? What does it mean for world peace? What does it mean for policy making? What does it mean for partisan politics? If there is only one truth and he's got it, what are the ramifications of millions of people taking that same identical stance alongside him? And he is, in the United States, far from alone when it comes to fundamentalist Christianity, and throughout the world he is far from alone when it comes to fundamentalist religions. This has been the problem of my life. And past is prologue, so let me tell you a little bit about my past. In 2006, at the age of 46, I had a crisis. I came out of the closet as a gay man after a 25-year marriage. And what that meant for me as part of my healing process is I published a book. So I started selling a book, which got me noticed by an Arts and Entertainment Network documentary, which got me noticed by an activist in New York who did a short video of my ex-wife and I and what our experience was like, which got us noticed by somebody in California. So we were flown out there for an event, which meant that we were sponsored next for an event in Salt Lake City. So I've been an activist and I've been on the road for from about 2006 through 2008. I went across the country literally from coast to coast. Even still, I get involved in activism. Whenever Brother Micah comes to the Florida Atlantic University campus, I head over there to make sure that I ask him how many heterosexual marriages have been impacted and dissolved by virtue of the fact that my husband and I have now been married for 5 years. So this kind of history is important for this essay. What I found at the end of my activism, after 2 years of traveling and going on the road, I found that really there was much more than just a fight against religious-based bigotry. There was a fight to defend women's rights, a fight to end war and hate, to end racism and oppression, to fight poverty and reverse materialism, and just a battle ongoing all the time to try and get quality of life issues resolved for everybody. So it was a much bigger battle than gay rights. What I discovered in my own work before I returned to university was that hegemony was the enemy. If you were white, Christian, and conservative in the United States, pretty much everybody who's on your side is speaking the same talking points. But so their agenda is fairly clear. If you are not white, heterosexual, or Christian, or male, then you've got other issues. And so there's a lot of chatter going on. And so the heavy black arrows in this diagram here represent the difficulty in trying to get an agenda put together. There is no agenda when you come to a counter-hegemonic discourse. At least there wasn't during the 2 years. I could not find one in the 2 years that I was an activist. So if there is this barrier, if there's this brick wall called hegemony between me and my goals and a lot of allied organizations who should be fighting alongside of me, what we're doing is we're hitting this wall of hegemony in multiple different locations. We're all got our own battle. We're all struggling our own fight against that. And we've got, as you see by the downward arrows, a lot of backbiting and backstabbing going on. So the dissenting points of view have to be, I saw them as having to be eliminated so that we could all focus our attention on working together. And so I thought, what kind of a person could do this? And I came up with a metaphor of the juggler. So if you put the juggler in the center here, and you have all of these people that you can inspire them to somehow become engaged, and if you could also inspire them to feel empathy for each other so that they don't see each other on the counter-hegemonic side as competitors, then we could actually bring all of these forces together, get rid of the downward arrows, focus all of our attention through one person who could hit the wall in one location, break through, and then we can all pursue our own 6 campaigns towards social justice issues. And so what I also found when I was traveling as an activist, that there was media of all kinds. Public speaking, there were film, and there was a film festival, there were performing arts, public speaking, and artists singing. There were the literary arts people were always signing books. We always had book signings. There was always a gallery and an exhibition, and quite a lot of that exhibition material was sculpture and installation art. And so I thought, you know what, it's time I learned to juggle. I wasn't alone. A good friend of mine, Carol Lynn Pearson, after she read a particular blog post of mine, she told me something which has really stuck with me, and that is, Lester, you need to learn how to create light, not heat. And so I listened to Carol Lynn, and I also listened to my husband, Ed Rowe. He said, Lester, go back to school. And so that's what brought me back to university. So in May of 2009, I enrolled in the multimedia journalism bachelor's program. By December of 2010, I was getting fairly close to graduating. I started on my capstone classes, and I created a persona for my journalism projects called The White Guy on MLK Boulevard. That got me involved with the Belafonte Tokolsi Center, and I joined a study circle program of theirs in February last year. In May last year, I graduated, finally got my bachelor's degree, and then prior to graduating, I had already been accepted into the public administration program, into their PhD program. So that's where I'm at present. During that period last year, I also found out about a grant proposal because I was helping the Belafonte Tokolsi Center. I saw one grant proposal, and I just gave it a cursory glance, and then I realized, you know what, what's National Science Foundation doing funding a grant in public administration? And it was for virtual organizations of social technical systems. I worked towards that because it had a far out deadline of the end of the year. And so I had 8 or 9 months to kind of think about how I could, if my activism, if my efforts as an activist throughout 2006, 2007, and 2008 could somehow have been enhanced if virtual organizations had been implemented somehow. Through the Arab Spring process of last year, we all saw how Facebook and Twitter played an important role in, especially in this picture here is of Tahrir Square. And all they needed were laptops and cell phones, and these organizers were able to put it together. This particular event happened on January 26th when they shut down the internet, and nobody had any reason to stay inside at that point in time, so they all spoke with their feet, and they all gathered in Tahrir Square. It was so effective throughout the year. The Occupy Wall Street movement picked up by September. Occupy Everywhere was going by October and November. And at the peak last year, 951 cities in 82 countries. And Time magazine honored the protester as the person of the year. But what happened 1 year later from the Tahrir Square gathering that we saw the picture of? The Tahrir Square occupiers actually only ended up with 7 out of 498 seats. They ended up with 1.4% representation in the new government, which is likely to be formed out of the Egyptian revolution. What that told me is, finally, by February 2012, I get it. Protest narratives are not governing narratives. The people at Tahrir Square could not translate their protest into governing. Old guard organizational elites who had been banned, actually, by the Mubarak government moved into place very, very quickly and formed 67% of the governing body. The protesters were totally frozen out of the process because their protest, while disruptive, was not successful in actually putting together governing narratives. So that's what this is all about. My presentation in this paper, which accompanies it, is about eliminating is about how to create a governing narrative through a protest narrative and through social media and through virtual reality. It outlines a vehicle, it outlines the engine for that vehicle, and it outlines the fuel that will propel them both. So let's talk about inner cities now. Let's move, now that you've got that background, let's talk about the inner cities. In Miami in the 1930s, what was the dominant narrative? I should say white Miami in the 1930s. We had their Art Deco buildings going up. Everybody was going down there. Enormous amount of growth and very popular location, and they needed workers. So where did the workers live? Well, they were colored folks. They lived in Overtown. And there was so much demand, but it was a segregated section of the city. And they were not allowed to live anywhere else. And so what they did was they packed them in tighter, and they packed them in tighter, and they packed them in tighter. And they put these shotgun houses up just to provide them with a place to live. And finally things got really bad. So in Liberty Square was an idea that was put together by 7 white lawyers who formed because they wanted to support, they saw an economic opportunity here. They knew that there was demand for housing. And they thought, well, let's solve this housing problem. So they went way out of the city. You can tell from the aerial diagram here that they went way out of the city, way to the outskirts, and they created this new housing development for African Americans. But what narratives dictated that they had a segregation wall in this brand new subdivision? This is the remnants of that wall that exists still today. So the narratives in the 1930s were still segregationist. And so that is the backdrop against which I'm now working as I work with the Belafonte de Colsey Center. This is what Liberty Square looks like today. And what are the narratives now? That was the 1930s. So what are the narratives? Actually, Miami, as they grew into the neighborhood, they called it Miami's model city. It was the first planned master plan housing development in the United States. It was put together by the Public Works Administration as part of the New Deal. And today's narratives, what are they? Well, the name of the housing development now has a nickname. It's called the Pork and Beans. It's very, very low Section 8 housing, low income. Miami Vice and Burn Notice have also contributed the narratives about what Liberty City is all about. Grand Theft Auto in the 1990s named one of their 4th video game edition, Liberty City Edition. And when I went out to take these pictures, I was part of the study circle. I wanted to, and the white guy on MLK Boulevard, and I was finishing my capstone program. Everybody said, Lester, be careful taking pictures, don't get out of your car. So these are the narratives that filled the environment today. And they were very careful to point out to me that, Lester, it's not that this is a intentional crime neighborhood. These are crimes of opportunity because of the poverty and the unemployment and the absolute dearth of any other opportunities for these young people. So let's talk about John Rawls' theory of justice here. I'm a big fan of John Rawls, where he talks about the balance between equality and liberty. If everybody is equal, then nobody has liberty. If everybody has liberty, then it's a dog-eat-dog world, and we're living in very Hobbesian times. So, but also you got to remember Miles' law. I am a gay man, married to an African American, with a marriage that is not recognized as valid in the United States. So I will not get my husband's Social Security. We can't file a joint tax return. All in all, it costs us economically, in pure dollar terms, about $10,000 a year by not having our marriage recognized. So Miles' law says that from my position, from my husband's position, who is African American, this is how close we've actually come, and the scale is rated here by allowing white liberty to trump minority liberty. And so as we move through this period, you can see that the whites have been able to dictate all of the rules, and the African Americans have not had much of a chance for equality. They've not moved toward equality very much at all, from my assessment. 1937, this is where things were at. Things were going along fairly flat. Nothing was changing for African Americans, especially in the South. And then Rosa Parks came along, and the Brown versus Board of Education came along, Dr. Martin Luther King, and then we had the Kennedy and Johnson era. Affirmative action came in, Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and Griggs versus Duke. So things were going along fairly well. Things were getting better, but then something happened. Nixon was elected. He declared a war on drugs. For African American males, things took a stark turn to the worse. A really rapid, drastic change for the worse. And so that's from an African American point of view. But what I really want you to focus on here is what happened from the white perspective. the balance in the United States has always been